beautiful people. All right, so this is supposed to be the 8 a.m. live coffee talk. I have a little bit to talk about third eye and trauma and explaining chakras. So if you are up and ready and got some coffee, I got something to drink. Hang on. Ugh. Okay, it usually takes people a few minutes to get in here, but I kind of wanted to go into a little bit more detail about the third eye and why it gets blocked or imbalanced. I wanted to discuss trauma, so I'm going to give people a few minutes to get in here. I'm late anyway, and then we're going to talk about it. I also want to talk about that the fundraising donation. I wanted to explain how much money we got and what I'm going to be giving. Go into more detail about emotional trauma this month. So I hope some people come in here, and if not, I'll take this down, shoot a video, and then post it later. So I'm gonna give everybody a few more minutes, but I did have a giveaway for Kathy Ellis. She won, and I'm gonna send her a hair growth stimulator. But what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to just get started. The third eye area. Whenever we talk about chakras, that actually means in Sanskrit, spinning wheel. So you actually have like spinning wheel vortexes that are more energetic in certain areas. So they call them the 7 chakras. Chakra means spinning wheel in Sanskrit. It is a spinning vortex of energy that's released from your body outward for a few inches. So like if you talk about the third eye, if you talk about the throat, you'll have that subtle energy that's coming off of your body for a few inches, and it's just one of those things. It's factual. So it's not ancient religion, it's ancient medicine, if you want to say. So I wanted to talk about what goes on in that third eye area. In your third eye area, typically, it involves intuition, it involves wisdom, it involves having foresight, but that doesn't have to mean that it is pseudoscience, hokey pokey. Your third eye area encompasses that prefrontal cortex. That is where your wisdom lies. Basically, your logical thinking skills, your cognitive thinking skills, being able to make rational decisions, being able to put things in order, self-control, those kind of things, diplomatic or executive thinking skills. So that's what is in that third eye area and that prefrontal cortex. Interestingly enough, when someone has been through trauma, good morning. Interestingly enough, this is going to go into abuse, trauma, and things of that nature. Typically, when someone has been in a situation of abuse, that prefrontal cortex will shrink. Due to the hormones released and the effects of trauma, the prefrontal cortex, the third eye area, the third eye chakra, will shrink. So someone who has been through a lot of abuse or been through a lot of trauma will lose those skills they may have had before, like diplomatic or executive decision making, logical thinking, reasoning, order, being able to think in order. They will lose those abilities. All the emotional memory regulation, self-reflective, self-control, all of those thinking skills reside in that third eye area, and it's in the prefrontal cortex. Interestingly enough, psychopathy is related to a difference in prefrontal cortex function. So cognitive thinking, evaluation, self-control, decision-making, logic, mood, critical thinking, all of those things that are there when someone goes through abuse and trauma, those type of thinking skills decrease because the prefrontal cortex is shrunk. What happens is, from running on fight or flight mode, they begin to act erratic. They begin to lose the ability to rationalize things. They will exhibit cognitive dissonance. They will, and if this happens as a child, you will see children with arrested development, meaning that once the trauma starts, they will actually, or if the trauma starts at a very early age, never be able to emotionally develop. So they're arrested at their emotional development is arrested at a certain point. They won't be able to go further. So when children are in abusive environments, and that doesn't mean physical, that could be mental, that could be emotional, they exhibit arrested development. And that's why as an adult, you'll see a lot of adults with extremely, they act like children. They act like children. They can't go back in time. They've never been able to develop emotionally. That prefrontal cortex was shrunk at an early age. It was never able to develop fully. And so that's where you're going to see problems with people who have been through traumatic events as a child. So they never seem to kind of grow up. They stay stuck in that acting like a child mode, throwing temper tantrums, not being able to have empathy, things like that. So that is a sign of an imbalanced third eye chakra, okay? Things that you can do to clear that out. And I wanted to, while people are in here, hit the thumbs up button, y'all. Things that you can do to clear that out it are, one, the brain, just like any other part of the body, has to be given something to strengthen it, something to grow. If you have been a victim of trauma of any kind, or if you think that area could have been affected due to any type of abuse, you can regain those cognitive thinking skills. You can move on with life. You can better yourself, your reasoning, your decision making. But a lot of people who have been victims of narcissistic abuse will find that they are in that cognitive that cognitive dissonance stage, that brain fog stage. They can't get past it, and it's hard to level back out. Reading, working out, lots of massage with essential oils. I said yesterday, citrus essential oils, mint essential oils. Ylang ylang is one. If you're an overthinker, if you're stimulated in your thoughts, but you can't make, you don't seem to get past that brain fog stage, eating nuts. Walnuts in particular, and if anybody knows about the doctrine of signatures, how walnuts actually look like a brain, they are so super healthy. You can regain all of that, and I wish they would apply this in, say, domestic violence shelters. I wish they would apply this in rehabs. I wish they would apply some holistic care to people who have been through traumatic events, maybe PTSD, people who've been through war. I wish they would apply some of these just, very practical ways to help people regain, not just journaling, not just therapy. Those things are very beneficial, but also some of these everyday practices, whether it's getting some exercise and sunshine or eating lots of fish. You need lots of essential fatty acids, to help that area regain its strength or to expand. But yeah, so those are some things you can do. The dopamine and the serotonin that's released during, let's say you're dealing with an abuse victim, the dopamine and serotonin that's released in those times cause that person to almost become addicted to that situation. So when they are out of that situation, they are going through basically some type of a withdrawal, almost like drugs. You're going through a withdrawal, and the brain fog is so bad that they have a real hard time. Getting over what they've been through, making heads or tails of what they've been through. And just like being addicted to drugs, it's much easier for someone who has been victimized to go back, because to them it's like a drug. But it's affecting the brain so badly that I wish in recoveries and domestic violence shelters, I wish they would apply some of the knowledge that's out there besides just therapy to actually help work on the physical too. If physical and holistic medicine were to combine, it would be amazing. But it seems like in our society we get one or the other. Yeah. Good morning, Maria. So basically, when people are going through trauma, and they are really experiencing an imbalance in that third eye chakra. It's not just the physical and it's not just the mental or emotional. Interestingly enough, when I talked about it yesterday, I did a video and I was kind of whipping through it because I had to go somewhere. But when someone's experiencing an imbalance in that area, usually they are dealing with something that's going on in that prefrontal cortex. And like I said, applying essential oils and massage to help lift the mood, making sure you're getting your exercise, making sure that you're not putting a lot of toxins in your body, making sure you're eating foods that are beneficial to that area. Let's see, what else? I was headed somewhere on, nitric oxide boosters, minerals, and liquid B vitamins. Those are going to help with the brain fog. Those are going to help with better mind clarity. All of those are going to help with those things. Eating lots of fish, like I said, eggs. Good morning. I just went no contact. Yeah, there is, it's become an epidemic dealing with, I'll be, you know what, I'm just going to give you an example. What popped up on my TikTok this morning. It has become an epidemic that people who have had to deal with narcissistic abuse or domestic violence, they're actually creating almost like an underground railroad, because in the courts, it is so hard to get help. In law enforcement, there's just a lot of education needed. It's hard to see who's telling the truth and who's telling a lie. It is my goal. I would love to develop and I've started like taking notes. I was going to write a book about my personal situation, but I've just not been able to commit to that. But I wish there was more education out there for people who have to deal with this in other areas, so that they could, one, realize what the victim's going through. How do you tell who's telling the truth and who's telling a lie? Who's the abuser? Who's the victim? Who's pulling the strings? You know, there's just so much information needed out there. And one of them is that abuse victims are going to exhibit mental instability. They are going to exhibit, that's why it's so easy for abusers to say, oh, they're unstable. Oh, they're just trying to process what they've been through. And it can be so far out there that other people have a hard time believing them. And unless that person can bring themselves out of that brain fog, get the therapy they need, start taking care of themselves and their bodies, they may stay stuck in what appears to be a mentally unstable situation. But they may not have been that person before. Or if it's someone who was dealing with abuse from childhood, they never seem to grow up because of that arrested development. And they'll, go through childhood with trouble with the law, addiction, in and out of jail or prison. So I just wish there was more education out there for people who have to deal with abuse victims to understand exactly what they're going through. Like, you can see this stuff on an MRI. Their brains are actually shrunk in that area. There's actually things going on in that area. The fact that you have, I wanted to talk about this. The fact that you have those transmitter receptors, those neurotransmitter receptors that cluster in these particular chakras, those are directly related to emotions. So when people talk about balancing those chakras, those neurotransmitter receptors are releasing more hormones in that area based on an emotion at that time. For instance, your heart chakra, you've got oxytocin that's being released right there. That's the feel-good hormone. So that's usually a good thing. That's something that's gonna elevate your mood, make you feel better. That's a positive. But when you're around a toxic environment, or even if you're just dealing with stress, depending on what type of stress it is, it's gonna hit you in those areas, and you will feel that release of hormones in that area. If that makes sense. It's not pseudoscience, it's factual. So when those hormones are released, you will feel pain in that area. If you are someone who has tried to speak on a certain subject, or you wanted to tell your story, and you've been silenced, that throat chakra, you will get that lump in your throat. Yeah, I mean, that's just factual. Yeah, well, I mean, there's a there I do want to touch on this, y'all. There are a lot of people in, the courts, or law enforcement, that try to help victims, that are waking up to what's going on. Like I said, this is like an epidemic. This is like and they're having to deal with this so much. And of course, domestic violence calls are the most deadly, the most dangerous calls to get. So giving officers the education to understand the situation and what you're dealing with, how to handle it, who's the victim, what to do, and understanding that you may even try to help someone and they may go back. Because it's not that they are ignorant to their dangers, or sometimes they're financially incapable of staying away. There's no domestic violence shelters or places for them to go. Sometimes they're financially controlled. Sometimes they are addicted to that dopamine that's being hit. And I actually gave counseling to someone, and I tried to explain to her, she had gotten herself into a situation where she went, what in the world? And I said, that person that you're attached to is your dope man. You don't understand that it is an addiction, and that person has become your dope man because that intermittent reward is hitting you with that dopamine. So it's just like heroin. You see that person like your dope man. So when you start to unravel and unbox all the things that are going on with victims, then you can better understand why they're acting the way they are, why they make the decisions that they are, how it's best to help. Therapy is number one. Education is number one. Getting information out there to people so that they say, okay, well, maybe I'm sorry, I have had this for a while. Anyway, yeah, my throat chakra is very imbalanced. I had something going on personally that I wanted to share, but I can't right now. I thought I would have my son a little bit more, but that whole situation that I thought was going to be closed personally, that went out the window. I'm trying not to share personal experience on here because I'm not trying to use my platform, but yeah, there were some things in that agreement that were just unagreeable. And then there was basically a clause of not being able to talk about it at all on social media. And that's, a violation of my First Amendment right. So they get away with a lot. I'll just put it that way. I moved to a different state at one point. Yeah. I moved to a different state. Yeah. And you've got good people in all areas. You've got good and bad people in all areas. Some churches, I actually attend a church where they actually talk about, there's a program called Celebrate Recovery, and it's not just for people who are recovering addicts. It's people who are dealing with any type of hang up. It could be addiction to gambling. It could be addiction to porn. There's a lot of guys in there that are addicted, that are recovering from that. People who have been affected by SA or DV, or just, Celebrate Recovery is coming out of all of that. So yeah, there's good and bad people in different areas. It doesn't matter if it's a church or if it's a law enforcement, or if it's a judicial system. There's good and bad people in all of that. And I think Micah Miller's story was super important on exposing how an abuser can make themselves this person in the community that's just, oh my gosh, you know, we love them, and they're doing mission work, and they're leading a church, and all this crazy crap's going on behind closed doors. And no matter how much she tried to save herself, it was just like constant accusations, or how much she tried to tell her story, constant accusations of being mentally unstable. That is your number one marker. And I think law enforcement needs to understand that. I think judges need to understand that. I want to write an education manual. That is my goal. I want to write an education manual based, like, how do you handle this? What are the signs of the true abuser? What are the signs of the abuse victim? You know, the stages that they go through. That is what I want to do. That is what I want to do. I want to write an education manual that will be shared, because it's really, really hard to get people to understand, no, she wasn't mentally unstable. She was going through a whole lot, and she didn't know how to handle it. And it took her a long time to come to her decision to leave. And by the time she did, you know, he had already developed this whole story narrative of how mentally unstable she was. He had tried to get her committed. He had made her see a therapist or a psychologist. He had her put on medicine. Yeah, they go through so much to try to hide what they're doing. And yes, she probably did exhibit some mental instability because of all the crap she went through. But that was a physical manifestation of what was going on mentally. She was probably in cognitive dissonance. She was probably dealing with brain fog. She was probably dealing with, you know, a lot of fight or flight, having her, you know, things tracked and being monitored and, you know, stalked. All of that stuff does so much damage to your brain that's why you exhibit it. It's not because you are mentally unstable. Now, take a person out of that situation, they level out. They get therapy, or they start working out, and they start eating right, and they start giving their brain the nutrients that they need. Meditation, journaling, all of that stuff that helps your brain go back into, you know, the person that you were before. So anyway, we've got 9 people in here watching, and we're talking about the third eye chakra. We're talking about the effects of trauma on the prefrontal cortex. We're talking about how to help heal those things, how to identify who is the true abuse victim. You know, it's you can talk to many, as long as they are educated. You can talk to a lot of therapists and psychologists, and it's easy to see who the real victim is if you have some education behind you. And I think that's the problem with Micah, and the whole community was just swooned over this guy and his accusations of her mental instability. It was just insane. We definitely need support groups. It's almost like feeling grief. The problem with, if you're talking about separating from an abuser, you're going through grief, you're going through cognitive dissonance, you're going through brain fog, you have lost your dope man, your dopamine's not hitting anymore. So all of it, you are going through all of that at one time. Some people feel actual pain in their chest. They're no longer getting that hit of oxytocin. You know, it's said that a long time ago, they actually used to put it down on death certificates. Like, some people would die of a broken heart. Your heart, the ligaments and the structure of your heart, when you go through grief, actually, you know, loosen. Your heart's not as strong. It's a physical effect. So when all these hormones are no longer hitting, you're missing the mark on, you know, what you think you had as a love or whatever. You're having to prove yourself because you're being called mentally unstable. You're going through like all of it. It's not just one thing or another. It's not like, oh, my parent passed away and I'm sad, dealing with grief. You're dealing with like all of it at one time. So yeah, your prefrontal cortex does shrink through trauma. And when it shrinks, where all the control of a normal thinking person, your logical thinking, your reasoning, your executive functioning, all of that stuff where it's controlled in your prefrontal cortex, when that shrinks, you lose out on that. So you become more erratic. A lot of people will pick up habits, addictions. Self-control is in that area. So they may not get up and make their bed. They may not stick to their routines. I mean, there's very clear signs of emotional, physical, violence, abuse, whatever you want to call it, in someone that's been through that. And if they were, I hate to say it like this, if they were like a normal person before that, and then they go through this stage, it's a very clear sign of abuse. And in children, you'll hit that arrested development. And when they get older, if a child is in a family with a narcissistic parent, they will go through that where their brain did not develop correctly. And when they get older, it's almost impossible to get them to catch up. They would have to play catch up, because at some point in time, and it could have been just like, let's just say a young girl was assaulted, you know what I'm saying. Okay, so let's just say a young girl was. At that point in time, her emotional growth is stunted. So let's just say 13. Let's just give it an age, 13. So at that time, her emotional growth would be stunted at that point. As she gets older, she will emotionally mature, but not past that point very much, unless she gets therapy to try to understand and unpack what she's been through and does the work to heal physically. You got to work on the mental, the physical, the emotional, and all of it. So that arrested development would, hit right there at 13. Take a child that grew up with a narcissistic parent. Take a child that grew up from birth with a narcissistic parent. The likelihood that they are ever going to change is zero. The likelihood that they themselves are going to become a narcissist is great. It's great. So they never had a chance to develop from the beginning. It's been a controlled process their whole life. They have been brainwashed their whole life to deal with this abuse. So they're never going to get out of it, because they don't know anything else. They can't think anything outside that box. But emotional trauma, physical trauma, yeah, it definitely damages the brain, and it damages it in that third eye chakra. So when you talk about intuition, you talk about wisdom, you talk about all the things that are related to that third eye, basically you're talking about the prefrontal cortex and all that comes with it. The logical thinking, the reasoning, the self-control, the ability to make clear executive decisions, put thoughts together, chronologically, or how would I say that? Well, put thoughts together logically. But when you have someone that's never been in that, and they get to an older spot, and then they go through that, such as someone who gets married, or someone who, older, goes through a traumatic event, they will exhibit those mental instability characteristics for a time, take them out of that situation, or get them the therapy they need, and they're back to being the person that they were. Let's see. Another thing I wanted to say, let's see. I didn't know how to walk out my front door just to walk to the corner store. Yeah, it is over 20 years. I still feel lost someday. Definitely. Okay. So when you talk about going through brain fog, for some people who have been through that, what you want to do is, I can't stress therapy enough, and I can't stress education enough, but you need to also work on the fact that prefrontal cortex is probably shrunk, and you really need to work on the physical part of it. You really, massaging with essential oils, eating the right foods, working out, getting exercise, getting sunshine, getting lots of water. Physical exercise will help to detoxify the entire body. Eating right is going to give that your brain those nutrients that it needs. Massaging with essential oils is going to bring the blood flow, oxygen, nutrients to the brain. So working out is going to bring the blood flow, the oxygen to the brain. Using a nitric oxide booster before you work out will help to increase that. We don't get enough amino acids in our diet to help our body, especially after the age of 40, keep the nitric oxide in our body. Nitric oxide is produced in your body from the amino acids. So you want to get a good amino acid supplement. I talk about it a lot to help with the blood flow, to help with exercise. And that's going to decrease. What it does is it relaxes your blood vessels and your lungs. So as your blood flows, you're able to pump more. It decreases blood pressure, brings more blood flow to the brain. Yeah, so take a look at the things that you can do physically as well. All right, so okay, yesterday I did a little short video on the third eye area, and I want to go ahead and say I drew a name. Kathy Ellis is going to get the hair growth stimulator. Also, I wanted to report back to y'all. Thank you so much for ordering last month. The total in sales were $1,100. So I'm going to give $110 to the School for Kids with Special Needs. That'll go, I'll do a video on that later, I guess next week. I was going to do it this week. I just had some things, other personal things I had to tend to. At the same time, I'm on here talking about some of this stuff. I'm dealing with a lot behind the scenes. Beet juice. I've put up a video where I actually have ground beetroot powder. Beet juice is great. Beet juice is great. Also, beetroot powder. Avoid those gummies. There's some gummies out there that are like for iron or as a nitric oxide booster, the beets. Just avoid the gummies. The gummies are not very effective. I don't care if you're taking vitamins. For kids, yeah, okay. But for adults, avoid the gummies. They're just not as effective. You can, there's nitric oxide testing strips that you can get. And when you test, if you've been taking the gummies, you'll find that the people are not increasing in their nitric oxide production. If you take one of those test strips, you can buy them probably from Amazon for $5. But the gummies are not as effective, and that's not just for nitric oxide, that's for vitamins and minerals or whatever, immune boosting power. Avoid the gummies. They are a waste of money unless you're doing it for kids. I would stay away from the gummies and try to take as much actual natural herb as possible. All right, so Kathy Ellis won that hair growth stimulator. I'm going to be giving $110 away to that charity of choice. This month, the charity is going to be a domestic violence shelter in my area. So if y'all want to order anything, check my website out, Missy's Naturals, and that's where the money will go this time, 10%. I'm doing this every month. And next, hey, if y'all have a charity that you would like for any of this to go to, put it in the comment section or email me, and I will, like, for instance, if y'all don't comment, I'm just going to pick a charity every month. This is just going to be a continuous part of my business. I just feel like, the Lord wants us to give away 10%, so I'm just going to give it to wherever I think it needs to go. Oh, I don't think I finished this earlier because I get on these blah and I start talking. So, yeah, there's an underground railroad starting up for people who are victims of abuse, and that I had got hit up on TikTok. Now, women are actually starting to reach out and put up their stories on TikTok asking for help. Where's their nearest shelter? Where is there somewhere, I've moved and I have children and I need a job. Does anybody know of a job in this area? Like, there is starting to be a link up of people behind the scenes, because in our typical reality and the systems that we have going on right now, they're not able to get help. And that is pathetic. That is so, there is no excuse for that. When you know someone needs help, when you know someone, and again, it's back to education. A lot of the times the victims cannot get help because they're being accused of being mentally unstable. So they have to reach out to whoever else who has been in their shoes to help them, who will listen, who understands, who can walk them through all the changes that they're going to go through, or the financial crises that they find themselves in. So yeah, there's actually an underground railroad developing because people cannot get help in their churches or in the community. And when I say help, I'm not talking about financial help alone. I'm talking about someone who will point them in the right direction, maybe to have therapy for them or their children, someone who will help point them in the right direction of a job, someone who will help point them in the right direction of an attorney. There's those resources out there, but there's just not enough education out there in these typical systems of our society to get them to those women or men or children. I mean, I'm not just saying women, but yeah, there's an actual, that, I mean, that is, wow. Wow. When you have a case like Micah Miller coming out, and then you have people that are like having to go through underground systems or social media to get help, that tells you it's a problem. That tells you it's a real problem. And it is my desire to help these people. That, after having gone through what I've gone through, that is my heart's desire. One way or another, I feel like God puts you through a test to be a testimony, and that is my heart's desire, to be able to help other people understand what they've been through, how they can help and cope and move on. There's always light at the end of the tunnel, but understanding and education, that's the key. Okay, well, I'm fixing to get off here. It's 8:42. I really appreciate y'all checking in. Please do go go check out my website if you're interested, and hit me up with a charity to do for next month. Email me if you have any questions for holistic healing, body, mind, and spirit. Have a good day.